Well, welcome to the Shame-Free Zone. I am with my good friend, Dr. Z. Now, you can see that big Z on his shirt. Hi, Dr. Z. Thanks for joining me in the Shame-Free Zone.
Hi, Veronica. Good to be together again.
Oh my God. You and I have known each other since 2005 when my book, Sex Secrets of Escorts, came out, and you actually
Yes,
had me come out and talk to the students at Stanford.
it was a wonderful, wonderful day.
Oh, it was, and I came out a couple times actually.
Yes, after that, right.
Yeah, yeah, so much fun. And we've had a lot of adventures since then. Remember that book about orgasms that we were working on with Nikita?
All right, right.
Yeah, 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 so much fun. For my viewers, I just want to tell you that Dr. Z is actually Dr. Phillip Zimbardo, and he is a professor, well, actually emeritus now, because I don't think you're actually teaching at Stanford anymore, but you started teaching at Stanford in 1968.
Yes, long time.
And you've also taught at Yale University, Columbia University, and I think you've authored something like 50 books.
60 now.
60 now. Wow.
Since we last talked, 10 more.
10 more since the last time we talked. I'm not surprised. And I'm thinking, I mean, you are really iconic in the field of psychology, and you've written some psychology textbooks. So it's a really good chance that I was reading your words when I was getting my degree in psychology.
Right. I'm sure.
Yeah. But one of the things I wanted to bring to our viewers' attention is that there was a film that came out in 2015 called The Stanford Prison Experiment. And Billy Crudup actually played you.
Yes.
And that's actually been a pretty controversial topic. And I thought maybe we could just barely touch into that before we go into the Heroic Imagination Project, because really what I want to talk about today is how ordinary people can be heroes, because we so need more heroes right now.
Right.
More than ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Our country is in a bad shape.
It really is. It's, I mean, you and I are talking just before the United States election in 2020, and we don't have any idea what the world's going to look like next week. So that's kind of putting a lot of people are having a lot of tension right now. But before we talk about heroes,
the movie.
we talk just a little bit about how systems cause people to do evil things.
Yeah. So the Stanford Prison Study actually started August 14th, 1971, which means next year will be the 50th anniversary of that little study.
Wow.
And it's actually more popular now than it was in earlier times.
True.
And the movie Stanford Prison Experiment in 2015 is really a good movie. I was a consultant on the movie, so I got to see that things were about 90% accurate. There were some cosmetic changes that the director put in, but it's mostly accurate. And all of the dialogue between the prisoners and guards came exactly from my experiment. That is, we had videotaped and audio taped everything, and I turned all of those files over to the director. So the acting by the prisoners and guards is brilliant. It's I mean, brilliant acting. If it was not a low budget film, some of them would have gotten awards for supporting actors. And what the director did, your viewers might be interested, what the director did was he shot 2 weeks of only the prison and guards together. Like all of the scenes they were in and across the entire movie, he shot together because he wanted to create a real ensemble feeling among them. You know, a feeling of camaraderie among the guards, camaraderie among the prisoners, and actually hatred between the prisoners and guards. And he really achieved that. And so the study is really a demonstration of how social situations can shape, overcome, dominate personalities. So the study was done in 1971. That's when the Vietnam War was on. Nobody wanted to be a prison guard because, and the movie opens with that, asking, you want to be a prison guard? Nobody wanted to be a guard because prison guards, like policemen, were called on campus to stop student protests against the Vietnam War.
Right.
And so even though nobody wanted to be a guard, once they played that role, they became guards. And many of them became cruel, creatively evil, I call them, in the ways they thought up on their own to humiliate, degrade the prisoners. And the study was supposed to go 2 weeks. I ended it after 6 days because it was out of control. Prisoners were having emotional breakdowns day after day after day.
And as I understand, your, at the time, soon-to-be wife was instrumental in calling quits on that experiment. Am I right about that?
Yeah. So the study was going on day by day by day, and I made the mistake of playing two roles. I was the principal investigator, the researcher. That's the only role I should have played. And there should have been somebody else who was superintendent of the prison. But I played both of those roles. And because I couldn't get anybody, I would have had to pay somebody to play that role. And we didn't have any money to do the study. So as superintendent of the prison, you care more about your guards than the prisoners. Because in a real prison, prisoners come and go, but guards are your staff. So I made it clear guards could not physically injure the prisoners, but I didn't limit psychological abuse. And that's what they did day after day after day.
So you were actually a victim of your own research.
Right. Yeah, I was probably the most subjected to the power of the situation of anybody, because I was living it. I was, I was there 10, 12 hours a day. When I went to sleep, it would be in my office on the second floor. So I never really left the building of the psychology department for that whole week.
Right.
And then what happened was on Thursday night, my then girlfriend came down and saw what was happening. And she said, she started to tear up. She ran out of the building, and I ran after her, and she said, "This is terrible what you're doing to those boys. You love students. These are students. They're not prisoners. They're not guards, and they are suffering, and you are responsible." And then she said, "Come to your senses." And it was really like a slap in the face, because I mean, I was so into that role. I was superintendent, the other thing I should mention, the study was, even though it was in a basement of a psychology department, we made it very realistic. We had visiting days, we had parole board hearings headed by a former ex-convict. We had a prison chaplain come down to talk to the boys. And so it was as realistic a simulation as you could get without physically creating a prison.
So I'm wondering, do you think that the system was mostly what was at fault here, which was hierarchical, obviously, and punitive? Or do you think that the lust for power was the main thing that was operating here?
Well, for some of the guards, it's a little of both. For some of the guards, it was about power, because these are just ordinary students. I mean, the worst guard was a college freshman. Wow. Now, I should mention that all of the students, all the participants were college students, because I wanted bright, intelligent young men. We interviewed all of them. We gave them personality tests. So they're all normal, healthy, intelligent college students. Yeah. And if you're a college student, you have no power. I mean, especially if you're a freshman or sophomore. Right. And for some of them, some of them said, I put on the uniform, I got the club, I put on the sunglasses, and I became a guard. And then in their mind, because they see, prison movies, in their mind, guards dominate prisoners. Guards have to show prisoners that they have no identity. They are only a number. And this is what you saw in the film, and this is what we saw in the experiment.
Wow. And I'm just, I hope I'm not taking too much of a leap here, but I'm really curious, how much of this do you think is operating in the White House right now and with the Republican Party? Because I think we've seen a lot of people doing things they wouldn't ordinarily do.
Yeah, in the situation we're at, well, we don't want to get too political because maybe on November 4th we can have another meeting.
Well, I'm looking at this. It really doesn't matter who's in charge, because I don't think we have to be specific to Republicans. It could very easily be another party that, and we could look at other governments around this planet, but it just seems that when people get in positions of power, that they sometimes do things that they never dreamed they would do.
Yeah, well, I mean, the current president, um, now he is unique because he is a unique personality. So he's not the president like George Bush or Ronald Reagan. He's a unique personality. Well, Ronald Reagan was the first. He's an actor, became a president. So
Right.
so the current president is a unique personality, but he's dominating and domineering. So anyone in his household staff who disagrees with him on anything or gives him advice he doesn't want to take, he simply fires them. He has dismissed more than 50 people who are on his staff, so that everybody who stays there, and they stay there because it's a job, they're making money. Everybody who stays there has to be a yes man. They have to say yes sir, yes sir, and he runs it like military school, not even the military, like military school. And so we get, I mean, even to the extent where with the pandemic, where he initially had a set of scientific advisors, Fauci and Deborah Burke,
Right.
and he got rid of them. He said they don't know what they're talking about. In fact, I think he said Fauci was an idiot. He's the most knowledgeable person about the pandemic in the world.
He was actually quoted as saying, "The scientists don't know."
The scientists don't know. I know. So again, but he's a unique narcissist. We're not even going to mention his name. The president is uniquely narcissistic, meaning everything is about him. So it's like the prison study, only he's the superintendent and the warden and the chief guard. So he's all of them wrapped up into one.
Got it. Yeah. And boy, people do pay a very high price when they defy him. True. Yeah. So if right now, regardless of what political persuasion anybody is inclined towards, I think that everybody is looking for something that feels more heroic, more inspirational, more hopeful. And I know you started something called the Heroic Imagination Project.
Yeah. So I wrote a book, which I would recommend to your viewers, called The Lucifer Effect.
Yes.
Let's see if I have a copy someplace.
I have a copy.
Yeah, but you can hold it up.
I don't have it right here in this office. I have it at home.
Okay.
But yes.
And so the book is like there's 16 chapters, but there are 10 chapters devoted to the prison experiment in great detail about the ethics of the study, about what happened on each day, about the mistakes I made, about what happened afterwards to some of the prisoners and guards and the people who worked with me on my staff and me. But there's also sections on other prison, Abu Ghraib, on the Holocaust. So it's a book about how good people turn evil. And even guards in Auschwitz. I mean, I interviewed survivors of Auschwitz, a male and a female. They became friends of mine. And then, so at the end of chapter 15, I was immersed in evil. I was swimming in the muck of evil. And I said, oh my God, I have to get out of this. So the last chapter is saying, let's reverse our focus. Instead of saying, can good people turn evil? Can ordinary people become heroes? That was the question in the last chapter. And because they said, because when we think of heroes, we think of extraordinary people. Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, Mother Teresa, and we don't think about ordinary people becoming heroes. But I want to say, yes, ordinary people can become heroes, by coming to the aid of others in need and willing to sacrifice themselves for a cause. So you stand up for a moral cause, and something like you blow the whistle, knowing you could lose your job. That you identify fraud in your business or corporation, and where you actually physically help somebody who's in need. And then I elaborated 12 different kinds of heroes in that last chapter, and at the end of that, people began to when people started reading it, they said, you should go beyond just being a talking head. You should actually do the research. And when we did this study in 2015, the word hero and heroism did not exist in any psychology textbook, not in social psych, not in general psych. It's just really, it was a strange phenomenon. I mean, because I did a literature search on all textbooks, and heroes was not part of psychology. So it did make sense.
Just comic books.
Yeah, comic book heroes. Anyway, I grew up with Superman. Actually, Superman came out when I was a little kid. So then I did develop a nonprofit foundation called the Heroic Imagination Project, whose goal it is to teach people how to stop, look, and listen in order to help other people in distress. And we've been doing this. And now I have an educational program using social psych and cognitive psych in very dynamic lessons that we license to high schools and middle schools and businesses in order to actually teach people how to be heroic.
Wow. Okay. So can you give us just some idea of how you teach people to be heroes?
Yeah, but it really is how to teach people to be an upstander rather than a bystander. How to teach people how not to be prejudiced, how to minimize bias and try to understand people without judging them, without evaluating them. It's how to develop a dynamic growth mindset to say, you could do anything as long as you put in practice and effort. It's a magic P and E. And not have a fixed, narrow mindset. So these are the start of each of our lessons. Are 2 or 3 hours long. We go into great detail with videos and examples and critical thinking skills. And that's, so those are our lessons. And actually we license them for a relatively small fee. And then where I do it to a school system, I actually go and train like 20 or 30 teachers how to deliver these lessons.
And are you seeing some shifts take place? What age group are we talking about here? With this?
No, it's high school through college and businesses. But now some people who are using our lessons are redoing them for middle school and elementary school. And elementary school kids are the best because they have the most imagination.
Yes. Well, I'm really excited about this work. I was aware of it at its inception, and I had no idea it had become basically gone viral.
Yes,
so
it had.
Yeah.
And I'll send you some sample lessons that you know what it is, and if you want to promote it some more.
Oh, absolutely. And maybe we'll put a link to it below this video so people can find it. And I'm also going to link to the movie just in case they want to see Billy Crudup playing you.
He just won an Emmy for daytime television, best actor in daytime television.
Oh, you're kidding. I did not know that.
Yeah.
So have you guys remained friends?
What?
Is Billy your new friend?
No. Yeah. He's a good actor and really handsome guy.
He is a very handsome guy. I agree. So, what's in the future now? I know you are still just going so strong, and you've been doing this work for decades. And just wondering what's around the corner for you.
I don't know. The thing that bothers me most, you and I chatted about it early, is that our country is really in a desperate place now that we have not been in my whole lifetime. I grew up in the Great Depression, where we had, more than half the country was in poverty. I lived through, Vietnam War, the Iraq War. actually Second World War. But now we're having wars in neighborhoods. We're having, virtually every other day, we have instances of white policemen killing blacks and Latinos. We're having Black Lives Matter. So it's a country that I never knew before. I mean, it's a country where again, it's so divisive. There's people against each other. There's there's QAnon, there's Poor Boy. I mean, there's all these hostile groups. Sales of guns and ammunition, I just read today, are higher than they've ever been. So people are stocking up with guns, I mean, as if to start a war. And it may even be after the election, if the president is not reelected, there could be riots.
Well, whether I think that risk is there regardless of how the election goes, because there is so much animosity and contention on all sides.
Yeah,
I'm wondering, you've been working all these decades around the impetus for evil and also our birthright to be heroes. Do you have any wisdom that you could share that might help guide people to some more sanity? Because there seems to be a lot of agitation that I think takes us out of our prefrontal cortex and shoves us back into that reptilian brain, which doesn't have much more sense than a lizard. And how can people manifest their best selves?
Okay, I think that's a great question, Veronica. I think the problem now is we are encapsulated in the pandemic. So the problem is people are living at home mostly. People who had jobs are not going to work, coming home. People don't have a routine as they used to. You get up at a certain time, you have breakfast, you go to work, you drive to work, you get to work, you drive home. Mothers take the kids to school or when they're young. And now everything is encapsulated in this place called home. And in some cases, husbands and wives are not happily married. In many cases, we know half the people are single or one previously wed. Kids are not going to school, so they're hanging around home, bored out of their minds. And so it's this volatile. Home now is a volatile place rather than a place of love and affection. So those things have been transformed, and it also means that again, for many men, men are more likely to become violent than women in general. But for many men, aside from going to work, they also had sporting events they could go to, baseball games and football games, and now all of those come into their living room. But it's not the same as being alone watching a game, as being with your friends at a basketball game or and so aside from guns and ammunition going up, liquor sales are higher than they've ever been. True. So that means a lot of these people, especially men, are getting drunk. And we know spouse abuse is higher than ever. So we're just in a very bad, volatile place because of the pandemic that's locking us in. And now on top of that, what you see on television, you're seeing these riots in almost every city around the country, starting with police abusing, black men mostly, and then riots happening. So it's fueling the reptilian brain. That is, it's you're seeing visually explosions and fighting and killing and rioting, and it's really war in the streets. Now, before we thought of a war, the war was the enemy. It was the Nazis. It was Iraqis. It was whatever, North Vietnamese. Now the enemy is other Americans who think differently from you, who look different. So we're in a really bad place. And I'm just hoping somehow after the election, things can be equilibrated, uh,
Yeah.
softened, and the best of what it means to be an American comes out again.
Yes, absolutely. I have sometimes, but I work with a lot of couples as a relationship coach, and I have
Right,
seen a lot of stress in the home.
right,
As a matter of fact, although I took my business online and I'm meeting with my clients over Zoom and other online portals, I business actually picked up because of the pandemic.
yes, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's like, help, we need help.
Yeah, in fact, my son is a psychotherapist, and I have a colleague in Italy who's a psychotherapist. And essentially they're doing therapy online, and they're saying their business is booming. There are so many people who are now extremely distressed, extremely anxious,
Yeah.
um, you know, uh, and, and it's also partly also their life is encapsulated in sitting alone in front of a TV screen all the time.
Oh,
Um,
oh, it's terrible. Phil, I was streaming Netflix like everybody else on this planet last night, and no offense to the show, the makers of the show, but there was a new series called Social Distancing, and I might as well just still be on my computer.
yes, I know.
That's like, no, thank you.
Right,
I'm turning on, entertainment to try to remind myself of what it was like pre-pandemic.
right,
Um, and yeah, we are spending an awful lot of time looking at our screens now, as
right.
if we weren't doing lots of that before. I
Yeah,
think what I heard you say, and let me see if I caught your gist here, because what I got from what you said was basically, because we've become so isolated because of the pandemic, there's ways in which we have forgotten that we love each other. We're not connected to each other now, except maybe those small tribe that we speak to over the phone or online. Um, and in the past, before the pandemic, we were exposed to each other, whether we were going out or we were at a social gathering of some sort. And the people that we were coming in contact with didn't always agree with us, but we could see their humanity. We
yeah,
could understand that we cared about each other, that we were a community, and that we were here to support each other, regardless of whether our beliefs were the
right.
same or not.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I mean, they were people who disagreed with us.
Yeah,
They were not disagreeable people. See, that's one
very
way to
well
put
put.
it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
and so now, I mean, we have the mentality of people who disagree are enemies. So that's what it is. It's really an enemy mentality. And I'm saying we see this with all the riots taking place, all over the country. Um, one of the things I should be doing is I should be developing hero programs for police cadet academies.
Yes.
I just thought of that now, is that, they need training in what we know about implicit bias, about, self-restraint, and
Yeah.
it should become, it's not defund, it was silly, defund the police. No, but it's essentially what it is, retrain the police so that they understand they are working for the community, not against the community.
I know that we said we weren't going to get too political, but I'm just going to express one opinion here. I lived up in the woods in a county that you could not get police protection. So everybody up there had a firearm. And if you did call the cops, you're going to wait an hour for them to arrive. And I want to tell you something, not real comfortable. Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
when people start talking about defunding the police, I'm like, that's the Wild West. I've gotten a teeny taste of that, and I don't think you know what you're talking about.
right,
And at the same time, I have the vast majority of police that I've interacted with over the years have been bullies, and they have been bigots, and they've been sometimes criminal. So, balancing those two facts, I think it's important that we have some type of law enforcement, and it needs a serious overhaul.
yeah. No, we obviously need law enforcement. I mean, there are, in quote, criminals always. There are people who commit crimes, crimes of opportunity. Poor people who need money are going to commit crimes. But essentially, it should be police should have the mentality, I'm policing the neighborhood to try to keep it safe. So people feel that they are not going to get assaulted. They're not going to be violated because of police presence. But in many cases, the poorest neighborhoods have the fewest number of policemen walking on the street. And police are driving around in police cars, hardly noticing anything that's happening.
True. I was thinking when you were just now kind of envisioning a heroic imagination project for law enforcement.
Yeah.
I would imagine certainly there's going to be a certain number of people who have gone into law enforcement because they want to have power. But
right.
I also think there's a fair number of them who really wanted to be heroes.
Right.
And then maybe got pulled into a system where being a hero wasn't really encouraged. And I would imagine that people like that would really welcome an opportunity to embody the hero that they wanted to be originally.
Yeah. Let me go back in time. In 1971, in the early part of the summer, before we did the prison study, students were protesting the war in Vietnam, and the president of Stanford called the police on the campus to stop student unrest. And in many cases, the police really beat up students. So, and I always think there was, policemen who are relatively uneducated, not always college-based, probably not college educated, were really physically beating up students. And there was really antagonism. And one of the things I did is I went to the head of the police department. It was a new chief of police, Captain Zerka. I still remember. 1 second. Captain Zerka.
Okay.
And I said, I would like to start a program of having some of our college students drive around with your policemen in the squad car. So so students get to know what police do, and police get to interact with students. So it was diffusing town gown tension, and it worked really well. In addition, the students then could invite the policemen to come and eat in the dormitory. And so it was a really good, so it was a program where essentially getting to know what the other person was like. And then out of that, when I started thinking about the prison experiment, I went to the captain. I said, we could even involve some of your policemen to play the role of prisoners to see what it's like, and he was going to do that. And then he said, we couldn't afford to have them out of service for 2 weeks. But he did agree to have a Palo Alto police squad car do all the arrests of the prisoners.
I remember that part.
And that made the study work, because from the get-go, it was realistic. It was real police doing real arrests, bringing the students into a real jail, putting them in a real jail cell. But I'm saying it all started with my idea how to diffuse town gown tension.
Well,
worked really well.
You were there in the 60s during the riots and a brand of police brutality that dominated the 60s. And can you give me some perspective? Like you said, this is the worst our democracy has ever been. And I agree with you, but I'm wanting to get some context here. How is it different from the riots and the police brutality and the civil unrest that we were experiencing in the 60s?
Yeah, it was in the 60s, it was, you were for or against the war. Now it's, so it was pro-war, anti-war activists. And it was a war in Vietnam. And then it was mostly the war in Vietnam. So the people saying, we should kill the gooks. I mean, what was the one saying? And others are saying, no, it's not American. We should withdraw our troops. And but it was really the enemy was the other. It was like, should we be in the war? Now the enemy is each other. So the enemy now for the police are Black people. For Black people, it's white policemen who are the enemy. And now there are other whites who are siding with the police that, who either are prejudiced against blacks or they're authoritarian themselves, authoritarian personality. They like domination and force. So this is new. We have not seen this on a nationwide level.
Yeah.
And I mean, also when there were riots, it was almost every city in America. It was not, there's a riot in Chicago, there's a riot in, Tulsa or Oklahoma or Miami or something. There was like for 3 weeks, like Portland, Oregon, which was a lovely little town. Lewis and Clark College is there. They have one of the best, Powell's, the best bookstore in America, the biggest bookstore. So and there were a lot of hippies went there from New York, other places, and then suddenly it became the hotbed of violence in America. So things are really different now. It's totally different than it was in the 60s. It's Americans against Americans because of color or creed. And so we need a unifying force. So I'm hoping after the election, there will be a new unifying force.
Well, and I share that hope. My hope is also, when I think about the whole idea that the Vietnam War othered the people that were being bombed and napalmed, right. I think that actually created some disillusionment in the U.S. government. And it also kind of points to the roots of some of the othering that takes place when it comes to racism in this country. So moving forward, I would hope that we don't just come together as Americans, but that we would also come together as inhabitants of this world, that we would actually start to see that this planet has gotten very small. And I think the pandemic should have illustrated that to us by now. So if we're not paying more attention to how we treat people around the entire globe, as a species, I don't think there's a lot of hope for humans.
Right. Well, the other thing that should be bringing us together is the imminent disasters of climate change. Right. That now, they keep saying we only have 8 years or 7 years. We're seeing it now. I mean, the forest fires in the West Coast, which are the worst in history, and the hurricanes and tornadoes that now, see, there it's too late because the water has heated up 2 or 3 degrees in the Gulf of Mexico, in the lower Atlantic, in the Caribbean. So these hurricanes, there's more than we've ever had. They're more destructive than we've ever had, and that's going to continue. Yeah. In California, I live in San Francisco. We have not had a drop of rain in 5 months, and there's literally none in sight. And all you need is, so that means all forests are dry, and all you need is some wind and a spark. And then you have, people, houses burned down and people burned to death, and whole cities destroyed. And that's not going to change.
That's something that we need all the people of this whole planet to be working on.
Yeah. It's reducing fossil fuels, increasing recycling, conserving resources. It's all those things, but they sound vague. Like, so I'm sorting out my garbage, recycle. It's like, how is that making a difference? Well, it is if it gets multiplied by a million times over, and that's the same thing like wearing a mask. There's 48% of Americans are committed not to wear a mask.
Oh my God!
Yeah, it's a recent survey because they think it's limiting your freedom. So it's limit. It's you are now a gangster killing other people. Not with a gun, but with your coughing, with your breath.
Well, Phil, you and I got political.
Okay. Okay.
And by
But
the
we
way,
didn't mention names. We didn't mention any names.
we didn't mention any names. I've been collecting masks as a fashion statement. I have all kinds, and I really enjoy wearing them.
I do too.
So,
Yeah. No, I collect masks from around the world. It's mostly Indian
I
hand.
remember those in
Right.
your house, which is also a historical landmark.
Yeah. I love masks, and I have hand carved Indian masks and masks from around the world, from Africa. And I was actually in Mardi Gras in New Orleans some years ago, where for that night everybody is in a mask, and it was exciting.
I'll bet it was.
Yeah.
It sounds like it. I am looking at our time, and I know you have. You are a very busy man with a very busy schedule, and I'm just so excited that you were able to fit me in.
Yeah.
And
Well,
plus,
this week is the virtual conference of the Western Psychological Association.
oh,
It was supposed to be in San Francisco, and it was the 100th anniversary of the conference. And I'm giving a symposium and lectures, one on climate change, and a teaching conference. So I'm busy every day from morning to night. And now they know if you're watching. I mean, you can't just, that is, when you tune into any program, then your logo appears. There's my face there, so people know I'm looking. And if my face is not there, then they know I'm not looking.
So you better get there.
Yeah.
You know, before we go, I just want to tell you that I have so much regard and affection for you, and you're not just my friend. You're also one of my mentors, and you have had a really positive impact on my life. And I just wanted to say that publicly.
Thank you. It makes me feel wonderful, Veronica.
Thanks.
Yeah, long. We go back a long time.
Yes, we do.
And hopefully we'll have a long future together.
I have a feeling, most definitely.
Okay. Take care.
You too. Bye, sweetheart.
Bye.
Bye.
Dr. Z. Yes,
Dr. Z.